Coal mining has been the lifeblood of many communities across Appalachia. It's provided income, housing, and work for generations of men. But those good things often come with a deadly price tag, one of which we're going to tell you about today. Hello, folks. I'm Steve Gilley, along with Rod Mullins, and this is Stories, a History of Appalachia. Now, we appreciate you joining us on this video, and, well, we'd like to ask you to subscribe by going down below, clicking that subscribe button, ding the bell, too, so you get notified every time we have a new story out. And if you don't care, give us a thumbs up, too, huh?
Well, Steve, I don't think that a lot of people in this day and age comprehend some of the things that happened back in the early days of coal mining. That goes along with the song, "You owed your soul to the company store," let alone anything else. But, people just aren't familiar with it. But it was, you went to mine coal, yeah, but you kind of were like, well, for lack of a better term, you're almost like slave labor was what you were, more than anything else. Am I right?
Well, funny you mention that, because that could just be the term for something else that happened in this same area at Coal Creek. You remember that, don't you?
Yes, I do.
The convict labor, they were pretty much slaves up there. Mm-hmm. Now, this particular story, it's sort of close to that time, but to be honest with you, they didn't get involved in all that convict labor issue, at least not the company we're going to talk about today.
Right.
And that company is the Coal Creek Coal Company, which was organized by Knoxville businessman E.C. Camp. Its first mine opened in 1870 at the community of Fraterville in Anderson County, Tennessee. And unlike many other Coal Creek area mines, those operated by the Coal Creek Coal Company developed a reputation for entering into fair contracts with its miners, paying a fair wage, and operating safely. In fact, the Fraterville mine was considered one of the safest in the area, if not the entire state of Tennessee. And Rod, here's a fun fact for you. Okay. The Coal Creek Coal Company was one of the very few coal operators that never paid their men in scrip, nor did they engage in using convict labor, avoiding that labor unrest we talked about a second ago during the Coal Creek War in the 1890s.
Well, just throw my ideas completely out the window with this, because I was thinking company housing, scrip, all this other stuff, and now you're telling me, oh, they never paid them in scrip. But in May of 1902, that great reputation that Coal Creek Coal Company had for safety came to an end, because on that day, disaster came to the Fraterville mine. There had been some problems with the ventilation system over the weekend. It was causing the machinery to be shut down for a while for repairs. And when work started again at the beginning of the week, the ventilation had only recently been restarted. And that can cause a lot of problems if it's been off for a certain period of time and then the ventilation starts back again. But I kind of digress right there. Then for a series of unfortunate events, well, those happened.
Yeah, they did. That morning, a wall in the Fraterville coal mine collapsed. Several miners were sent to that collapsed wall to investigate. Unknown to them, the failure of the wall had allowed a pocket of methane that hadn't been cleared away by the ventilation machinery to be released into the mine. While they were there examining the debris, something ignited the methane, causing a terrible blast at about 7:30. Debris was blown out of the mine entrance, along with William Morgan, an older English immigrant miner who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Rod did survive for a few minutes before he died, but was struck mute by what had happened.
Well, it was reported that day that about 150 men had been killed in the initial explosion, including Mr. Morgan. Now, the dead also included the mine foreman, George Atkins, who had, well, get this, folks, he had his head blown off in the blast, according to reports. Immediately, a rescue party was organized by the mine superintendent, George Camp, son of E.C. Camp, and a Welsh miner operator from Jellicoe named Philip Francis. They planned to enter the mine to recover the victims and also search for any kind of survivors. The going was tough, though, with the men unable to make it more than 500 feet on the account of fallen slate from the mine and the ceiling where everything was coming down and all the caustic smoke and gas along with the heat of fires caused by the explosion. Now, Steve, there were 200 men, or roughly about 200 men, who had been mining about 3 miles from the mine entrance. Presumably, they were still alive due to the distance they had been from the explosion, but they were unable to return to the surface.
Well, Rod, another party entered the Thistle mine on the other side of the mountain, which connected to the Fraterville mine's tunnels deep underground. But they, too, had to turn back due to the noxious fumes they encountered in their mine, caused by the fires ignited by the explosions. The parties did what they could, though, and by the next day, 70 bodies had been recovered from the mine, ranging in age from 14 to 50. They still couldn't make it much further into the mine to search for survivors or other victims, which they now estimated to number close to 300. Mine officials did, however, start to pump air into the mines to clear out the smoke and gas, although, frankly, that didn't help to clear the mines of the smell of decaying bodies. With this done, officials hoped they could rescue whatever survivors happened to be left.
Yeah, just spreading the stench around all through the mine and everything. But from the Thistle mine entrance, digging was, begun to reach the men who were deep inside the Fraterville mine. Now, the men eventually made it to entry number 15 of the mine, where they found the bodies of 26 miners. Now, these 26 men had realized that they were in danger, and they had done everything they could to save their lives. They even tried to barricade themselves away from the foul air until they were overcome, and they later died sometime around noon, the estimate was. So we know this because, seeing death coming, they had ripped pages from their daybooks and noted what they had been doing. They then wrote farewell letters to their families on the paper that they had left on the walls of the mine passage, including one man who wrote a letter to everybody asking that we all live better lives. And here's just a sample and a few of their last words, Steve.
This letter from James A. Brooks, quote, "My dear wife and baby, I want you to go back home and take the baby there, so goodbye. I'm gone to heaven. So meet me there." Signed, James A. Brooks. Wow. And this other one from Scott Chapman. "To everybody, I found the Lord. Do change your way of living. God be with you."
Well, here's a couple of letters that I've got here, at least. From J.L. Val. "For Henry Beach, Alice, do the best you can. I'm going to rest. Goodbye, little Ellen darling. Goodbye for us both. Elbert said the Lord had saved him. Do the best you can with the children. We're all praying for air to support us, but it's getting so bad without any air. Howard, Elbert said for you to wear his shoes and clothing. It is now 2:30 on Monday. Pal Harmon's watch is in Audrey Wood's hand. Ellen, I want you to live right and come to heaven. Raise the children the best you can. Oh, how I wish to be with you. Goodbye, all of you. Goodbye. Bury me and Elbert in the same grave. My little Eddie, goodbye, Ellen. Goodbye, Lily. Goodbye, Jimmy. Goodbye, Horace. It's 25 minutes after 2:00. There is a few of us alive, yet, oh God, for one more breath, Ellen, remember me as long as you live. Goodbye, darling." Written by J.L. Val. One more, Steve. This one was from John Hendren. "Dear darling mother and sister, I have gone to heaven. I want you to tell you, to meet me in heaven. Tell all your friends to meet me there, and tell the church I've gone to heaven. Tell my friends not to worry about me, as I am now in sight of heaven. Tell Father to pay all I owe, and you stay there and at the house or at the home, or at the home, and bury me at Pleasant Hill if it suits you all. Bury me in black clothes. This is at about 1:30 on Monday, so goodbye, dear Father, Mother, and friends. Goodbye all, your boy and brother, John Hendren."
Well, Rod, as they moved deep into the mine, it was discovered how bad the initial blast had been. In a report by the Tennessee Commissioner of Labor, the men found that, quote, "Brattices had been destroyed, and along the main entry, the force of the explosion was terrific. Timbers and cogs placed to hold a squeeze were blown out. Mine cars, wheels, and doors were shattered, and bodies were dismembered. In total, 216 men died in the Fraterville mine, which represented, get this, Rod, all but 3 of Fraterville's adult men, leaving hundreds of women widowed and about 1,000 children fatherless.
Wow. Well, on June 8th, 1902, a mass memorial service was conducted at the Bryceville Community Church. 89 of the miners are buried in the Fraterville Miner Circle in Leach Cemetery, just off of US 25W at Rocky Top, which is on the National Registry of Historic Places. And Steve, when I think of this, I think of some of the more recent mine disasters, maybe not taking out as many men and killing them, but still almost the same exact scenario. Gas, a buildup of it, something turned back on, the ignition, and then boom, the explosion happens. And I think of Sago. I think of one that probably you remember back in the early to mid 90s, the South Mountain explosion that happened near Norton, Virginia. And I also think of McClure. We've done a podcast on the McClure 1 mine and the explosion that took place. Each one of these are different. And then when you lose a family member in an explosion or in a rock fall, I've lost 2. I've lost 2 uncles, actually an uncle on my mother's side and an uncle on my father's side. They're brothers, but it still leaves you numb to think about this stuff and to think that these men had to go underground and had to fight through all this. And people in one way give the miners such a bad name or such a bad, how can I say this? Bad rap for what they're doing. But for a lot of them, this is all they've ever known. This is all they've ever done in their lifetime.
Well, what's tragic about this is that this is one of the very few coal companies that we've ever heard of that was lauded for their safety and for the way they treated their miners.
Right.
And for this to happen shows you that accidents do happen no matter how safe and how cautious you happen to be. And this one obviously took a terrible toll in life in that town.
Certainly did.
And folks, that's the story of the Fraterville mine explosion, another bit of the history of this place we call home, Appalachia. Now, you can subscribe to the audio version of the Stories podcast at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Odyssey, Audible, iHeartRadio, and on a new app called Good Pods, which is a podcast app and social network all wrapped up into one. You can also subscribe on your favorite podcast app, whatever it happens to be. Till next we meet, so long, everybody.
So long.